welcome to Pacific Northwest Gardening. I changed the name of the podcast because gardening in the Pacific Northwest is a mouthful. So we are now Pacific Northwest Gardening. Today's episode is for the week of June 4th. It is published a day late on June 5th. I'm sorry about that, but I was in the San Juan Islands over the weekend and it was beautiful and I have no remorse for being late. So hope you had a lovely weekend like I did. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, let me just go over what we do. Each week, we cover timely gardening topics for gardening in the Pacific Northwest. That's British Columbia, Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. My particular gardening zone is 8B. You can find a USDA plant hardiness map linked in the show notes if you are curious about your zip code's hardiness zone. And then the flow for this podcast goes official gardening recommendations for the week. And you know, I switch between OSU and Tilth Alliance's gardening calendars. However, I was at Wilco Farm Supply this last week and I got an Ed Hume Gardening Almanac and it's really different. So I thought we would try that. So after the official gardening recommendations from Ed Hume, we'll cover the soil temperature for the past week and the weather for the upcoming week. Then we'll do the bloom report, what's looking really beautiful right now. A bit about what happened in my garden. And then finally a segment called The Dirt. And this week we're going to talk about shade and sun and making sure that your plants get as much sun as they need. So without further ado, let's go into Ed Hume's official gardening recommendations for the week. Okay, so Ed Hume's Garden Almanac. Ed Hume seeds has been around since I was a little kid. It was like the seeds that they would always have at the grocery stores and the local hardware stores. So I'm sure you've seen Ed Hume around. It is a local brand, even though it looks a little bit more corporate than some of the smaller organic brands. But it's so wild. So I picked up his little garden almanac and I was really surprised. His garden almanac is based on phases of the moon. And there's a little section in it that describes how he finds moon phase gardening effective and then challenges you to do it and track your progress. And he even offers you a free packet of seeds to do it and then report back to him. So I don't know. I thought that was pretty cool. I'm not a big horoscope person, but I thought we would go through what the almanac says. And if you are or you do like to garden by the signs, I would love to hear from you because this is way out of my depth. But to begin for the week, he recommends planting two things this week. Number one is radishes, and then the other is green onions. And honestly, I would never have considered planting either of those this late. So that's interesting in and of itself. So for the 5th and the 6th, which is today and tomorrow, Monday and Tuesday, it is dark of the moon, third quarter Capricorn. And he says, repot and groom houseplants, plant perennials and biennials, and seed radishes. For the 7th and the 8th, I guess that would be Wednesday and Thursday, dark of the moon, third quarter Aquarius, seed green onions, cultivate to control weeds, harvest early crops, and eliminate slugs. For the 9th and 10th, that's Friday and Saturday, dark of the moon, third quarter Pisces, plant perennials and biennials, fertilize. It's a good day to water. Prune shrubs, sow root crops. Oops, so I forgot to mention that. Any root crops, beets would be a good thing. Carrots would be a good thing. Canned fruits and vegetables. And finally, make sauerkraut. And then for Sunday, dark of the moon, fourth quarter, Aries, eliminate blackberries, cultivate to control weeds, deal with pests and disease, and harvest. So really different than our other recommendations, but I thought that was pretty cool. So I might try, I've been thinking about sowing carrots, so I think I might give it a go this week. I guess I should do that on the 9th and 10th, so Friday and Saturday. I think I'll give it a go. Without further ado, so Ed Hume offers free seeds if you do some moon phase gardening and then report back to the company. So if you want, I can send you that form so you can get free seeds. He also has another seed challenge where he offers free seeds as well. So if you send me a DM on Instagram, my Instagram handle is at the PNW Garden. I will send you the links to get his free seeds. So, as well as I always offer, if you do a review for the podcast, I will also send you free seeds for me. So this is like double free seeds week. So yeah, send me a DM on Instagram at the PNW Garden, and I'll get you all the Ed Hume details so you can snag some free seeds from him. Okay, so soil temperatures. This week they have held really steadily in the mid 70s, which is tracking bang on with the 10-year average for the week. You can check your soil temperatures in your zip code on a website called Greencast Online. I will also link that in the show notes. Next week's weather, it gets hot again and again. Zero rain. I think we're in the 4th or 5th week of absolutely no rain. The high will be 86 on Wednesday, and lows are comfortably in the mid 50s, so you don't have to worry so much about babying those peppers and more tender plants. The average temperature for the week, if you are using the water calculator from us, which I'll talk about at the very end of the podcast, the average temperature this week is 66 degrees, so I'm going to use 70 degrees for my watering plan this week. We had an incredible week of blooms this week. In addition to roses just getting better and better, have you noticed any peonies or poppies in your neighborhood? The peonies are beautiful. I have just one plant in my front yard, and it actually bloomed for the very first time this year. It was like stashed in total shade, and I moved it into a great sunny spot last year, but it did not bloom. This year it bloomed, and oh my gosh, they're like beautiful light pink, very densely ruffled blooms that are about 4 or 5 inches across. They are nuts. So I'm really excited about my peony, and I've definitely seen them around the neighborhood as well. Also, poppies, they are just have such great variety. I've seen some purple ones, some bright red ones, orange, and basically everything in between. Poppies are just such a great plant as well. I did plant some poppies this year. I don't have any in my yard, but I sowed the seeds really, really late. I had a big seed starting fail, so I just did not start things as early as I wanted to this year. And I did get the poppies in the ground, but gosh, it was probably seeds in the ground sometime in April, which is way late for poppies. So I think they may have a chance of blooming, but for those of you who have established poppies. I bet you're enjoying them now. So in my garden this week, I was actually not very active. The most that I really did was some really intense watering, which really paid dividends. My plants are bigger than this year than they ever have been before. So I am really believing in this new watering method, which is doing the math to figure out how many inches of water I need and converting that into minutes of watering based on the flow rate of my hose. It's totally working. My garden looks awesome and massive. So yeah, I'll mention that watering guide again at the end. But if you are curious about how much water you should be putting into your garden, the math is not super hard, and man, it has like changed my garden. So yeah, and I had gardened for close to 10 years under watering. So yeah, it's a good year. It's a good year for big plants. Anyhow, I visited the San Juan Islands to help a family member launch a boat for the summer season. So that was really fun. But up in the San Juans, I noticed that there was a major tent caterpillar invasion. And they are these fuzzy black and orange caterpillars that make nests in fruit trees and other trees, but they do damage the leaves. I looked it up because I was really curious about tent caterpillars. Actually, someone incorrectly identified them as monarch caterpillars, and I was so excited because I've never seen so many of these nests before, and I was really bummed when I found out it's just a nasty old moth that these caterpillars turn into. But I found an advocate of the tent caterpillar that said that when they do emerge, they only live for 5 days, but they are a huge salmon food source. So although they do damage plants, that person advocated for leaving them alone because it's great for the salmon in our region. So I kind of liked that. And then on my way back from the San Juan Islands, if it's open and I have time, my favorite place to visit in Skagit Valley is Snow Goose Produce on Best Road. And they have a ton of plant starts, but they also have just like the absolute freshest produce locally. And it's a little bit better, in my opinion, than just a fruit stand or something like that, because there's a great variety. They not only have vegetables and fruit, but they also have salmon and Dungeness crab and that sort of thing. But this week when I was there, the strawberries are outrageous. The rhubarb's outrageous. The cherries really good. So if you're looking for something fun to do for a beautiful drive, I really recommend checking out Snow Goose Produce. Also, they advertise immodest ice cream cones and they are the biggest ice cream cones you've ever seen. It's like a pint of ice cream on a waffle cone, and they have Lopez Island Creamery ice cream. So I got some blueberry ice cream too. That's very tangential, but seriously, if you're not producing all your own produce, which I don't, that is such a great place to go. And then also, I have been on the lookout and have finally found a harvesting basket. When I harvest out of my fairly small garden, I'm always like dropping peas and, you know, just setting my lettuce on the ground, and it's always a mess and I lose stuff. But they have these baskets. I'm sure you've seen them before. They are like woven grass baskets from Ghana, and I finally found one that's really shallow. So it's got like a really wide opening, but it's really shallow. And I know that's going to be perfect for harvesting. So I've already used it. I have chickens. So I have an egg carton in the bottom of that too. So I can put my chicken eggs in it. I love it already. I think I'm going to be using it for everything, maybe even laundry up and down the stairs. Okay, but let's see. Moving on. I could talk about snow goose all day. I did do a couple of interesting things in the garden. So I go through a lot of coffee, and I always compost the coffee grounds. And I was like, man, they are such a rich nitrogen source. Like, I really should just put them directly in the garden. And so I just did a little bit of research on the deal with coffee grounds. And so a really great thing to do is just put them in your compost or put them in your vermicompost in your worm bin if you have a worm bin. Someday we should talk about composting because I've done it all and with very mixed results. But I thought I was like, I'm just going to put the coffee grounds directly on the areas that need more nitrogen. Some internet research revealed that it doesn't immediately add the nitrogen to the soil. It takes like 3 to 4 months for that nitrogen to break down and be available. So beware if you need that nitrogen immediately. That's probably not a good bet, but that it also adds humus to the soil, organic material, water retention. So it's a great thing. You can also thin your leftover black coffee and use it too. Sometimes I'll have like a half cup left in the bottom of the pot. And so I thought I would put that in too. I would think that nitrogen would be available sooner, but I am not a scientist. So someone who knows more than me, please let me know. And then also, people were saying that it is good for repelling slugs, possibly cats, but that some experiments have shown that slugs actually don't care if they go over coffee grounds. So may or may not be accurate. And then I don't know why you would waste fresh coffee on your plants. I will not ever do that, I don't think, but you can put fresh coffee grounds on acid-loving plants like your azaleas, hydrangeas, blueberries, and lilies, and that will increase the acidity, lower the pH of your soil. But I don't think that's in the cards for me because I like using my coffee. And then, so I went to Half Price Books this week with my kids, and I got this like really awesome score. It is like a dozen magazines from 1966, and it is organic gardening and farming. And it is a super awesome read. I'm reading the June 1966 version, and it is classic. It's got really funny advertisements, most of them about tilling. I don't know, there were a lot of tillers for sale at that time. Oh gosh, now I just lost my place. Okay, but I thought this was really interesting. So use coffee for nitrogen, but I have a friend who has a small hobby farm in Bow, Washington, and I remember her saying a few years ago that her grandma always told her to put bananas under her rose bushes, and there's a whole article about this in this magazine, and it's like so classically written. I thought I would just read it. So How Roses Like Their Food by Phyllis Holloway. Fertilizing and the right soil care pay big blooming dividends for this Louisiana rose lover who learned by 15 years of trial and error. So it's a longer article, but it says banana skins supply potash, boost rose growth noticeably. For the past 5 years, I've also been feeding my roses with banana peels. They contain much potash besides supplying a little humus, and they also contribute beneficial bacteria, which help plants grow in a healthy manner. I find my roses always put out quite a bit of new growth within 2 or 3 weeks after being fertilized with the peels, which decay very rapidly. Oddly enough, my roses respond more to banana peel feeding than they do to bone meal and manure, though these seem to help too. I generally cut the peels up into pieces of 1 inch or 2, so they do not require as large a hole when I bury them. I take peels from 3 bananas and bury these a few inches away from the main stalk of each rose. In about a month, if I see that the bush can still make further improvement, I bury 3 more cut up peels near the rose. To guard against over-fertilizing, I avoid giving any bush more than 3 peels at a time. I just love it. There's a picture of a woman, very like 1960s lady by her rose bushes. So I actually tried that today too. So I'll give a rose report, I guess, in a month. But on one of my roses that was lagging a little bit. That's what I tried. So I think between my friend's grandma and this magazine, it's a good bet. It's time for the dirt. We are approaching summer solstice. And that means that the sun is going to be as high in the sky as it will get. But that also means that the sun will be moving back into the south after the solstice. And I am so guilty of doing this. I will go out to the garden and I'll find a nice sunny place to plant something. And I'll plant it, and then I'll look either a few weeks later or even later in the day and realize that I planted it essentially in like deep shade, that it just happened to be in sun the moment that I was out there, and I didn't take another thought. So we are in the northern hemisphere and the sun goes pretty low into the south. And what that means is if you are planting something to the north side of any size structure or bush or whatever, it may be in total shade in a few months' time. And so depending on what it is and how long it needs to be there, it's just good to think about the angles. I totally did this last week when I planted 2 or 3 sunflowers, which sunflowers need sun. They're tiny transplants, and I planted them in a fairly relatively sunny spot, but when the sun dipped further down in the afternoon, they were completely shaded by some bushes that were, pretty small, but they were so close that it cast a shadow over these sunflowers. So those sunflowers are going to fail and just be, more diseased, and slugs are going to find them. It's going to be bad news. So the best thing you can do is be in a totally unobstructed area where no shade ever falls on your garden, but that is likely not going to be the case. However, you can maybe like 3 times in a day go out to your garden and notice where the shade is lying. So maybe you want to do like 8 a.m., noon, and 4. And just see if there are any unexpected shadows. I always find unexpected shadows. And right now, what will be affecting you is obstructions to the east and the west. However, once the sun starts moving into the south, obstructions to the south of your plants will come into play. And it can be really surprising. I planted an entire flower bed around June a couple years ago and did not even think that there would be a problem. It was on the north side of a fence, but the fence was quite short and it seemed like it was going to be totally fine, whatever. And in March and April, when that area, those flowers really do need some sun, there is none. It is in total shade all day long. So if you can be in a totally unobstructed area and to the south side of any, plant your plants on the south side of any fence. I know that's not always the case or possible, but be mindful that the things that will be on the north side of fences or have obstructions to the east or west, even if they are pretty low, they may cast more shade than you realize. And if you are working with conditions that do have some shade, it is not at all the end of the world. But know that the heat-loving vegetables like beans and corn and tomatoes and peppers and sunflowers and all the things that are cucumbers at kind of going into the garden right now, those are the ones that are going to need at least 6 hours of good sunlight a day, if not more. Things like greens, peas, any brassicas, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, Asian greens like tatsoi, bok choy, that sort of thing. Those are going to be okay with a little bit less sunlight. So if you have shade that's covering part of your garden, I might take that into consideration when you are deciding what to plant where. That you'll have greater success if you plant more of the green things in the shady spots. All right, well, that is it for today. I hope you have a great week. Stay cool. Don't get a sunburn. Please, if you can, subscribe on your podcasting platform of choice and rate. It means the world to me to get that honest feedback from you. And send me a message on Instagram at the PNW Garden, and I'll send you some seeds in thanks, and I'll get you the hookup on the Ed Hume seeds just as a little bonus. And I've mentioned a couple of times this week about the watering calculator app. It's live. It doesn't have a lot of context, so I will be putting instructions on it in the next few days, hopefully in the next week. But you can find it at water.pnw.garden. Water.pnw.garden will give you the amount of time you should water your garden plot if you know three things: the length and the width of your plots in feet, so like 2.5 feet by 10 feet or whatever, and then how fast it takes your hose at the typical vegetable watering rhythm that you have, how long it takes to fill up a 5-gallon bucket. And if you have those 3 data points, you plug them in. Oh, and you can choose how often you want to water that week. It will tell you how long you should water that plot. It is a lot longer than you think it is. And it also takes average temperature into consideration. So this week, the average temperature is 66 degrees. I'm going to use the 70-degree calculation for my watering times this week. I think I'm also going to reduce the number of days I water so that when I water, I'm watering more deeply. Let's see, 70 degrees. I think that'll be 1.5 inches of water. So I might water 3/4 of an inch twice this week rather than the 3 to 4 times that I typically do. I'm really getting into this, and I think deeper, less frequent watering, once you're past the germination and tiny seedling stage when things are really vulnerable and just they're getting their roots established. Once you have plants that have established roots, watering them less frequently, saturating the soil more deeply is going to be successful. So again, that URL is water.pnw.garden. Let me know how it goes. Send me a message on Instagram at the PNW Garden, and I hope you have a great week outside. Take care.